So this is a continuation of using textures in WebGL, and this is our final product that we want to achieve. So now we're gonna add the following code to our main function right after the call to init buffers. So we're gonna go into our, it's gonna be the WebGL dash demo, and I'm gonna control F so I can type the name. Is gonna be init buffers, so it's gonna be init buffers, like that. So we have it here in line 83 in my case, so it's gonna be after. Okay, so add the following code to your main function right after the call to init buffer, and we need to add this piece of code. So we're gonna load texture, so we're gonna create this variable named texture like this, and we're gonna set it to something. We're gonna set it to load texture, so it's gonna be to load texture, and in the parentheses we're gonna pass in first the GL, then we're gonna pass in a string. It has to be in double quotes, so this time it's gonna be the cube texture, so it's gonna be the cube texture dot png, and I already downloaded this cube texture dot png file. Okay, so I already have it here. Now we're gonna end this statement with a semicolon, and let me see. Okay, so now flip image pixels into the button to tab order that WebGL expects. So we're gonna go below, and we're gonna have the GL dot pixel. Okay, GL dot pixel store I. Let me see, that's correct. GL dot pixel store I, and we're gonna pass something here. We're gonna pass in the GL, and it's gonna be the GL. Let me see, unpack. So let me see if I have it. So it's gonna be unpack. No, GL dot unpack underscore flip. Again, no, just flip underscore y and underscore web. Okay, WebGL, like that. So we have the GL that unpack underscore flip underscore y underscore WebGL, and as a second parameter is going to be this boolean true and lowercase letters, so we can save it up to this point. Okay, so we have added this piece of code. Note, finally download the cube texture png, so if you don't have, you can just click here and download it to your folder. Okay, so the name of my folder is games here, so I just downloaded it and I save it here. Okay, so now mapping the texture onto the faces. At this point the texture is loaded and ready to use, but before we can use it, we need to establish the mapping of the texture coordinates to the vertices of the faces of our cube. This replaces all the previously existing code for configuring colors for each of the cube's faces and the init buffers. So let's see that. So add this function to your init buffers .js module. Add this function to your init buffer. So we're gonna close the main one and we're gonna open the init buffers. Okay, let's close this one too. Okay, so add this function to your init dash buffer. So we're gonna add this and add this function. Let me see how many functions. So we have the inner function here. We're gonna open curly braces. We're gonna have the GL return, so it's just one function. Okay, and we are gonna go right here, so pretty much just before the export. So we're gonna have this function and we are gonna name it init texture buffer. So it's gonna be init texture buffer, init texture buffer, and we're gonna pass in as an argument the GL, and then we're gonna open curly braces, and we're gonna have this variable name. So it's gonna be a constant, but it's gonna be named texture core buffer. So it's gonna be texture, okay, texture core buffer. So it's gonna be texture core buffer. Okay, so and we are gonna set it to the GL dot create buffer. So it's gonna be GL dot, it's gonna be create buffer. We're gonna open parentheses. Outside of that, we're gonna have the the curly braces. Okay, outside of that we're gonna have the GL dot, and it's gonna be bind buffer, so it's gonna be bind buffer, and we're gonna pass in two parameters. So we're gonna open parentheses and we're gonna have the GL dot, and it's gonna be array underscore buffer, and then it's gonna be the texture let me see, texture core buffer. So texture core, okay, so yeah, I got it right. So GL dot bind buffer, GL dot array underscore buffer, the texture coordinate buffer. Okay, that's fine. So we're gonna go below, and let me see, so we are still in this side of this inside of this function. Now we're gonna have this constant declaration, so we're gonna name it. Okay, it's gonna be named texture coordinates. Okay, so it's gonna be texture coordinates, like that, and we're gonna set it to this array. Let me see, and I'm just gonna copy this, just the array, not the whole code, but oops, I don't wanna make a mistake typing in the wrong number, so I'm just gonna grab the brackets here. So we're gonna paste it, and we have this variable name texture coordinates, and we are setting it to this array. As you can see, we have the front, the back, the top, the bottom, the right, left. Okay, so we have that. And okay, so outside of the brackets, we are gonna have in the GL that, and it's gonna be buffer data. So we're gonna have the buffer data, open parentheses, and inside of the parentheses we are gonna have in the GL that array underscore buffer, separated with a comma. And okay, GL that array underscore buffer, that's fine. Then we're gonna have the keyword new, and it's gonna be float, so it's gonna be float 32 array, float 32 array. Okay, that's fine. Open parentheses, and we're gonna have the texture coordinates, so it's gonna be texture, okay, texture coordinates, like that, comma at the end. Oops, just comma, because we have 1, 2, 3 parameters, and then we're gonna have define the third parameter, the GL dot, and then it's gonna be the static drum. Okay, we can save it, and we can just put a comma at the end, so that's fine. Okay, so outside of that, we're gonna go this parentheses, we're gonna put a semicolon at the end, and then we are gonna return. Okay, we're gonna return, and we're gonna return this variable. So it's gonna be texture coordinates, texture, it's gonna be texture core buffer. So it's gonna be this one here, not this variable, but the first one, the texture core buffer. It's gonna be texture, okay, the first one. Okay, so it's gonna be texture core buffer, and you ended up with a semicolon, so that's fine. And let's go to the HTML file and just right click and open with live server, or you can just press Alt+L, Alt+O, so we can have that. And okay, so this is the cube, this is our cube that we have right now. Okay, and let me see what else do we have here. So first, this code creates a WebGL buffer into which we all store the texture coordinates for each face. Then we bind that buffer as the array will be writing into. The texture coordinates array defines the texture coordinates corresponding to each vertex of each face. Note that the texture coordinates range from 0.0 to 1.0. The dimensions of textures are normalized to a range of 0.0 to 1.0, regardless of their actual size, for the purpose of texture mapping. Once we've set up the texture mapping array, we pass the array into the buffer so that the WebGL has the data ready for its use. Then we return the new buffer. Next, we need to update init buffers to create and return the texture coordinates buffer instead of the color buffer. So note, in the init buffers function of your init buffers.js module, replace the call to to init color buffer with the following code. So we're gonna, let me see where we are. Init buffer, that's fine. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna control F, and they're saying init color buffer, so it's gonna be init color buffer. So this is the function, but we don't want the function, we want the color. Okay, so this one, let me see. So in the init buffers function of your init buffer.js module, replace the call to init color buffer with the following line. So we are gonna have here, we can just pretty much let me see, we need to replace it, init color. Let's just delete this part. So we're just updating it, and it's gonna be text core buffer, so texture core buffer, and we are gonna set it to init texture buffer. So it's gonna be init texture buffer. Fine, we're gonna pass in the GL semicolon at the end. Okay, so that's fine. So we have updated it. Okay, as you can see now, we don't have the cube anymore, it's just pitch black. Texture core buffer, so let me see, that's fine. Texture core buffer, init texture buffer, so init texture buffer, that's fine. So okay, so yeah, and the init buffer function of your init buffer.js module, replace the return statement with the following. Okay, and the init buffers function of your init.js, replace the return statement with the following. Okay, so now let me see, we already have it, so I think it's pretty much the same. So we have return, the position is gonna be position buffer, that's fine. Okay, it's not the same. The texture core, so this one is gonna be texture core buffer. The texture core is gonna be set to the texture, it's gonna be texture core buffer, like that, texture core buffer, and then we're gonna have the indices set to the index buffer. So the only thing we just needed to update it, the second line, so we can save it. And let me recheck. So return position buffer, that's fine. Texture core buffer, that's fine. Indices, index buffer, okay, that's fine. Now update the shader. So the shader program also needs to be updated to use the texture instead of solid color. So the vertex shader, we need to replace the vertex shader so that instead of fetching color data, it instead fetches the texture coordinate data. So update the VS source declaration in your main function like this. So we have this in the VS, let me see where it was, it's gonna be in the WebGL here, and again it's gonna be VS source. So here we're just gonna type in VS source. Okay, so it's right here, and let me see. Okay, so we can just pretty much since I'm just gonna copy this one, and then just gonna, let me see, it's gonna be here, we can just delete this whole part and just updated it. So there's not much to it. So we have updated the VS source. Now they're gonna tell us probably to update the variable VS FS source. So let me see. The key change here is that instead of fetching the vertex color, we are fetching the texture coordinates and passing them to the vertex shader. This will indicate the location within the texture corresponding to the vertex. Okay, and pretty much here in this VS source we have backticks, and we have the attribute vec4, a vertex position, we have the attribute vec2, a texture core. Then we have the uniform mat4, u model view matrix, u projection matrix. So we have all that. And now we're gonna, okay, so the fragment shader. So the fragment shader likewise need to be updated. So now we're gonna update the FS source, update the FS source declaration in your main function like this. So again, let's just copy this piece of code since it's not very much, and just delete this piece of code here and just updated it. Okay, so that's not much here. Instead of assessing a color value to the fragment's color, the fragment's color is computed by fetching the texel, that is the pixel within the texture, based on the value of the texture core, which, like the colors, is interpolated between the vertices. Now, attribute and uniform locations. Because we change an attribute and added a uniform, we need to look up their locations. So we are gonna update the program info declaration in your main. Okay, so it's gonna be here now. It's gonna be it's gonna be program info. Okay, so we have this program info. We're gonna update it, update the program info declaration like this. So let me see what is changing. Let me see. So we have the program is shader program, attribute location is the same. We have the vertex, the GL, the program a vertex. Let me see. Yeah, everything is pretty much the same. Just to make sure, I'm just gonna copy this program here, this constant declaration program. Let's just delete this one and let's just update it. So we have the program, the attribute location, the uniform location. That's fine. Okay, so what else? Drawing the texture cube. The changes to the draw scene function are simple, and the draw scene function of your draw scene JS module add the following function. So now we're gonna start typing something. So I'm gonna go into the, let's close this one. We're gonna go into the draw.js, and let me see how many functions do we have here. So we have the function draw scene, and that's pretty much it. So we have another function. Let me see. Okay, function set position attribute, and then function set color attribute. Okay, 3 functions. And the draw scene function of your draw scene add the following function. So we have to add it in the draw scene. Let me see. I put it here, and this ends. It ends right here. Okay, so now add the following function. So we're gonna add the function set texture attribute. So if it ends here, we can start typing something. Okay, let me do it again. So this is the draw scene. It starts here. Let me see, and it's gonna end right here. So we can, we can go below and we can type a function, and the name is gonna be set texture. Is gonna be set. Gonna be set texture. Okay, set texture attribute. Okay, set texture attribute. Then we're gonna pass in the GL. We're gonna pass in the buffers. We're gonna pass in the program info, the second one. We're gonna open curly braces, and okay, set texture attribute. Okay, now we're gonna have this constant, and the name is gonna be set to 2, the number 2. Then we're gonna have in this another constant, and it's gonna be, the name is gonna be type, and we are gonna set it to the GL dot, and it's gonna be float like this, and there with a semicolon. Okay, so what else do we have here? So okay, this variable name num, every coordinate composed of 2 values. The variable name type, the data in the buffer is 32-bit float. Now we have normalizing stride, so let's go for the normalize, and we're gonna have in cons normalize. Okay, and we're gonna set it to false. We're gonna set it to false. Say, put a semicolon at the end. Then we're gonna have in the const stride. Okay, and we're gonna set it to 0. Stride, we're gonna set it to 0. It's gonna be a stride, and then it's gonna be the constant, and it's gonna be the offset, and we're gonna set it to the we're gonna set it to 0 as well. Okay, and the normalize, don't normalize, let's try how many bytes to get from one set to the next, how many bytes inside the buffer to start from. That is the offset. So okay, so we're gonna go below of the offset, and we are gonna have in the gl.binder gl.binder buffer. Okay, binder gl.bind buffer, and now we're gonna pass in the gl that, and it's gonna be the array underscore buffer, and then it's gonna be the buffers that it's gonna be buffers that texture buffers that texture, so it's gonna be texture chord. We can save it. Let me try it out real quick. So it's gonna be gl.bind buffer, that's fine, gl.array underscore buffer, and then it's gonna be buffers that texture chord. So we have that. We can end it up with a semicolon here, and we're gonna have pretty much the same, but no, we're gonna have the vertex attribute pointer, so it's gonna be the vertex. Okay, I have it here. So the vertex attribute pointer. Okay, we are gonna open parentheses, and inside of the parentheses we're gonna have in the program info, and it's gonna be that attribute locations, and then it's gonna be texture chord. Okay, texture chord, comma, and we're gonna have in num, we're gonna have in type, we're gonna have in normalize, it's gonna be the second one, it's gonna be normalize. We're gonna put in a comma, and we're gonna have a stride, we're gonna have in the stride, and also the offset, like that. We can save it, and we're gonna end. Okay, so in this parentheses, at the end of the parentheses, we're gonna put a semicolon here. Okay, so after that semicolon, after the parentheses, we're gonna have in the gl that, we're gonna have the gl that enable vertex. Okay, so gl that enable vertex attribute array, gl that enable vertex, okay, enable vertex attribute array, so that's fine. And we're gonna pass in the arguments that is gonna be the program info. We're gonna pass in also the attribute locations, and make sure that you type it like this: attribute location, no attribute locations. What else? A comma. Oops, not a comma. That texture chord, comma, semicolon at the end. Okay, so we have that, and now here nothing is changing here. In the drawSim function of your drawSim module, replace the call to set color attribute with the following line. So we're gonna go into the drawSim, and the drawSim function replace the set color attribute. So let me try. So it's gonna be set color attribute, set color. Okay, set color attribute, and replace the call to set color attribute the following line. So this is the function we are dealing with, this is the call. So the only thing that we are gonna update here is gonna be set texture attribute. So it's gonna be, okay, so it's gonna be set texture. We can just let me see, we are updating the set color. Okay, so set texture on, the only thing is changing this, is gonna be set texture, like that. Okay, it's gonna be set texture attribute, and we're passing gl buffers and program info. So okay, so nothing is changing, only we have changed set colors to set textures. Okay, so then add code to specify the texture to map onto the faces. Note, and your draw scene function just after the two calls to gl.uniform matrix for fb add the following code. So, and again, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna, okay, so we have it, this is the first one and this is the second one, and just after, okay, and your draw scene function just after the two calls to gl.uniform matrix for fv add the following code. So we're gonna have in the gl, gl.active textures is gonna be active texture open parentheses, and we're gonna pass in the gl.texture is gonna be texture 0, and we're gonna end it up with a semicolon at the end. Then we're gonna have in the gl that something, I mean the gl bind texture, gl.bind texture, and we are gonna pass in the gl, and it's gonna be texture underscore 2d, like that, texture underscore 2d, and then it's just gonna be the texture. So we can save that to this point, and let me see if we are not missing anything. So we have the gl.active texture, we passing in the gl.texture 0, and then we have the gl.bind texture, okay, gl.texture underscore 2d, and then texture, and finally we are gonna have in the gl.uniform, okay, so it's gonna be gl uniform, like that, and it's gonna be uniform 1i, and we're gonna pass in the parameters that is gonna be program info, and it's gonna be program info that uniform location, so uniform location, the second one, that you sampler, like this, that you sampler. Then we also gonna pass in 0, and we can save that to this point. So let me see, so gl.uniform 1i program info that uniform locations that use sampler, and then we're gonna have in 0. So we only have two parameters, this whole one and then the number 0. Okay, so we can close it and nothing is changing. Now WebGL provides a minimum of 8 texture units. The first of these is gl.texture 0. We tell WebGL we want to affect unit 0. We then call bind texture, which binds the texture to the texture underscore to the bind point of texture unit 0. We then tell the shader that for the use sampler use texture unit 0. So lastly, add textures as a parameter to the draw scene function, both where it's defined and where it's called. Okay, so now we're gonna update the declaration. So update the declaration of your draw scene function to add a new parameter. So this is gonna be simple. We're gonna go into the draw scene, and we are gonna go into the function, and we only have 4 functions, 4 parameters inside of the function, inside of the parentheses. So we have the GL, the program info, the buffers, and the cube rotation. So now we need to add the texture. So that's pretty much all we have to do here. So we can just put in another comma, and then we're gonna have in the texture just like that, and we're gonna update it somewhere else, somewhere else. So update the place in your main function where you call the draw scene. So we're gonna close this one, and we're gonna go into the main, and now we're gonna call it, so draw scene. Let's just control F. So it's gonna be draw scene. So it's gonna be here, and I'm just gonna type in texture. So it's gonna be here, texture, like that. we can say. So now we only need to update the place in your main function where the call draw scene. So we're gonna go into the WebGL demo, and we have the draw scene here on line 100 for me. So I have the parameters GL, program info, buffers, texture, and cube rotation, and that is exactly what they are asking us: GL, program info, buffers, texture, and cube rotation. So now we can just pretty much save it, and we can go into the index.html and just we can right click and open with live server, and as you can see it's working. So this is the cube, and this is what you should get at to this point if you're following along. Okay, at this point the rotating cube should be good to go. So you also have the complete code here, and this is the demo. So this is working like that, and yeah, that is pretty much all that we have for this using textures and WebGL.